Tommy, welcome back to My Home is Special. We are back from Laos, and I am eager to just touch base with you and say thanks for sharing and giving me so much advice before we left.
Hey kid, how are you?
The first thing I will say is when we got off the flight, I found my driver and we were headed out to the car, and I heard somebody call my name, and I was like, wait, am I not with the right driver? And I turned around and it was you. How did that happen?
Basically, it was a little bit before Lao New Year, and we had family coming from France actually, and then they took Vietnam Airlines, so they had to go through Vietnam, and then basically they ended on the same plane as you. And I realized on that morning actually that you were gonna be on the same flight, so I keep an eye on the people that were coming out, and I was like, "Hey, that's Keith." And I was telling my mom, "Oh, that's the guy I'm gonna meet later." And my mom's like, "Why don't you go say hi?" And I'm like, yeah, she's right. So I just walked to you because I was like, should I leave it for later? I don't want to disturb you guys, maybe. But yeah, I think I made the right decision to go and say hi. Yes.
Absolutely. It totally caught me off guard for two reasons. One, I know I probably stood out. There weren't a lot of black people getting off the plane from Vietnam to Laos. And two,
Yeah.
for a B-boy, you're a lot taller than I thought you would be.
I'm probably considered one of the tallest or taller b-boys in Laos, yes. And even in general, I'm considered quite tall in Laos as well. Although I'll probably say the new generation now, they grow a lot faster and then they're quite tall now. But I was always considered as a tall person in Laos.
Yeah, and what was interesting was just like when you meet people at work on Zoom during COVID, we had only talked on Zoom and I'd only seen you in pictures. So it sort of took me a second to or get myself oriented. Now, one of the things that was really awesome was you and your friend picked us up from the hotel for lunch and took us out right
Yes.
from day one. And we tried the papaya salad, we tried Lao sausage, we went to the smoothies, all the things that you talked about. Tommy, I'm not going to lie, I had sausage for the next 3 days. I had papaya salad every day I was in Laos. Into when we went into Vietnam, I was still ordering papaya salad there and in Thailand. And then we actually went back to the smoothie place the next day.
Oh, really? It's that smoothie place is probably hands down the best place to have smoothies in Vientiane. But yeah, like, I think Laos food is probably underrated. I think you probably have a lot of famous chefs saying similar things about Laos food. But I think it's for me, it's come and try it, and you'll know that it's very good.
Yeah, when you said you missed it when you were away in Australia, I think I underestimated. And papaya salad to me, I had never seen or tried or remember trying green papaya salad. I thought papaya salad was like the sweet orange vegetable. And this
Yeah,
was
yeah,
more of a savory, sort of pickled kind of papaya salad. So it was sort of sweet and
yeah.
pickled, and it was
More like raw papaya. Yeah.
exactly. And one of the things we noticed was we were getting it pretty mild. We made a mistake of not ordering food mild once, and we ordered the papaya salad. And one of the menus we looked at when we got to Luang Prabang said you could order it mild, moderate, spicy, or Lao spicy. And then you sent me a picture a few days later of real papaya salad, not what I was ordering.
Yeah.
Tommy, how do you eat that? It was so damn spicy. I couldn't imagine.
I think it's a bit like everything. It's I wouldn't say it's practice, but it's you kind of work on your tolerance. So I remember even back when I was a kid, I was introduced to this sriracha chili sauce that you'll find in
Yep.
supermarkets, probably in the US as well, with the green cap. And that was probably how I started to eat spice. My mom told me like you can put some in your food. Like I saw my parents putting in their food. I was like, what is that? I want to try. So I started put a little bit, and then the next time I wanted to do a bit more. And then also by trying it, it also meant that a few times I had to say to my mom, I can't eat my food. It's too spicy because I made a mistake of putting too much. But that's a good lesson. And then over time, I just ate more and more. And then now it's just something that I require in my food. I want the spice.
One other thing that stood out to me, aside from the Lao sausage, which I had almost every day we were there, was by the time we left Asia, I had tried papaya salad throughout Vietnam when I could get it. Every day we were in
Yeah.
Laos and then again in Thailand. You know, Tommy, I honestly felt like a little bit of an expert because we certainly had our favorites and we certainly had some. We were like, yeah, this isn't very good. They're not doing it right. You know, after like 10 days of eating it or something like that.
Yeah. Did you notice a little bit of difference maybe from the ones in Thailand and in Laos in
Yeah,
terms of taste maybe?
yeah, the taste was different. We tried some that had the dried shrimp inside, like the dried baby shrimp inside, which I really wasn't a big fan of. I didn't like the texture, but the freshness and the flavors in Laos were different. And I guess that's where we started, but we compared everything to that standard. And you took us to a place that apparently made really good papaya salad, which set a very high bar. But we did try it time and time again and felt like we had the original and everything else was an imitation after being in Laos.
I see, yes.
Now, Tommy, one of the other things that we talked about was the capital and some of the places that you had seen and spent time growing up in the capital. I got to say, I feel like people undersold the capital. When we got into Laos, I spent the afternoon walking after we went to lunch and hung out for a few hours. And then every day we were there, we went on tours and went to the parks and went to the night market. And it was actually really chill. Coming from Vietnam, Laos was like a vacation inside the vacation.
Yeah, I remember you telling me it's a big change, almost like a sudden gap coming from Vietnam, especially to Laos, where it's very laid back. And I must admit, I think it was probably also a very quiet day.
Mm-hmm.
Although during the Lao New Year, it was probably crowded in some areas, but I do still think that during April in Laos is a little bit quiet. Also because a lot of shops are closed, and then people also traveling during that period because it's a long holiday for locals anyway. But yeah, I think the pace from Vietnam and compared to the one in Laos is very, very different, yes.
It was also just the pace and the overall temperament. You had said people were really friendly, really laid back, and you go to the night market and it's kind of crowded, but nobody's harassing you. I mean, we were clearly tourists, right? Nobody was harassing you. I went to the monument, the Victory Monument, a couple of times and was taking pictures with people and asking them to model for me on the street. And everybody was just like super chill. If they didn't want to do it, they just said no and sort of nodded and kept it moving. But a lot of people were just hanging out and relaxing. And it was such a nice change of pace.
I saw the pictures. Yeah, I was actually surprised that you could get that many people to model and pose for you because in general, a lot of people are quite reserved or shy in general. But I think you managed to get a lot of people posing, which is very good.
Well, it's sort of like the internet and Instagram view of the world. There's a lot of rejection baked into the few people who said yes. And I would add that a fair number of them were tourists, actually, from outside of Laos. So the point remains.
Oh, okay.
The other thing we did was head up to Luang Prabang. So we spent a few days in the capital and then took the train up north. And it was much more laid back. It was quiet. It was very walkable. It wasn't a big city with like high rises and you could do some hikes and get out in nature. But LP had a ton of tourists as well. And they do the morning alms with the monks. And you just get a sense of how many tourists are staying there. So as laid back and as attractive as it is as a location, because you can get out in nature and see the elephants and do the other things, it was really crowded with tourists, which was a little bit of a different vibe than what we saw in the capital.
I think if you took maybe Luang Prabang, maybe I'd say 50 to 20 years back ago, it was a little bit different for the giving arm ceremony where, well, obviously less tourists, but it was also, I would say, less invasive from the tourist part because now they also have a lot of signs up like where they tell people, okay, if you want to stand and watch, you have to take a distance. If you want to take pictures, also you have to step back. If you want to give arm, you have to dress up and then also respect the culture. So that before was kind of like a local tradition where you have some tourists having a taste of what the real Lao culture is. Now it's almost an attraction in itself.
Yeah, that's a little bit of how I felt. And it was a little disappointing to see the signs up and how much those signs were ignored. People getting really close to the monks and cutting in between the line and things like that. But I also understood that it was something that had been going on for a long time. It was neat to see. And depending on where you stood, and I ended up going around the other side, so they were on their way back. So I sort of avoided where all the tourists were so that I could just take some photos with my zoom lens so that I could stay really far away. But it was also just really cool. And I admit, I didn't plan on getting up to see it because it starts at like 6 a.m. But they went right past our hotel. And my guide forgot to mention that they started off with this giant gong at like 5:45 a.m. So I was like, well, I'm up. I might as well go outside and see what's going on. It was really fun, though. But Tommy, I wanted to just touch base with you again and say thanks for sharing about Laos and telling me a little bit about what was special and then making the time out of your day to actually show us in person. It was an awesome way to start the trip, and it really just set a cool tone for the week and a half or so that we spent in the country. So thank you so much. We are truly grateful and look forward to seeing you either there or at a battle somewhere in the world, or maybe you'll come through Chicago. You always have a place to stay here.
Thank you very much. You're welcome. You guys are always welcome. It was my pleasure. It was really nice to finally meet you also after talking online and everything, meet you in person. It's always nice to meet people and really share our culture and even our stories. I always remember that, and I hope you guys also come back soon so we can chill again.
Welcome back to My Home is Special. This time we're going to do a recap episode on Lao People's Democratic Republic, or as we call it here in the U.S., Laos. And I have my friend Taylor with me once again. Taylor, welcome.
Thank you. So excited to be here.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Let's get started with something I thought was interesting in the interview was the city center that came up. And I wanted to know, did you get to see it? And what was the most interesting or most memorable part about it?
So it was interesting. We started in Vientiane, the capital city, and I'm not sure I know where exactly the city center was, but we saw the whole city in some ways. It's very walkable. Laos is just really laid back, and coming from the frenetic pace and the tourists tripping all over each other in Vietnam, and Hanoi is a huge city and Ho Chi Minh City is a huge city, Laos was just really chill and laid back. And Tommy alluded to that in his interview. He's like, people here just take it slower. And it was pretty chill. Unfortunately, Tosh was a little bit under the weather when we got there. So she stayed in the hotel and I just went out for a walk. And I was like, I'm going to go up the street and see what this temple is. And I looked down the street when I got to this temple, and basically at the end of the street, probably a mile away, it looked like the Arc de Triomphe from Paris. And I looked on my map and was like, what is that? And I was like, oh, that's the Victory Monument. I was like, well, I should go there. And so I told Tasha I'd be back at a certain time. I didn't even get there until that time. But I went over there and just hung out, and it was really cool. I knew the picture that I wanted to get, so I wanted to get in range to get that photo. And when I got closer, I was like, well, you might as well just go all the way over there. I went, and I was just hanging around. And like Peru, this was the spot where the tourists went to take their selfies. And so I started going up to people using Google Translate and saying, hey, would you mind posing for a couple of photos? And they said, well, how much? I don't have any money. I was like, no. My Google Translate thing said something like, hi, I'm a photographer from Chicago. I'm here for 2 more days, and I just want to take pictures of people. Would you mind posing for a few photos? It's free, and I'll get you copies on Instagram or WhatsApp. And I would just sort of walk around shoving my phone in people's faces, forcing them to read it. And
I love that.
Enough of them agreed to take pictures that I have a whole gallery on the website of basically impromptu models. You can tell when you're looking at people as they're taking selfies who just wants a selfie to say they were there and who's modeled before. So when I see people taking pictures, I can kind of start to get a sense of who would say yes, because I do good work, and I'd show them some of my work and be like, this could be you. And they said, let's do it.
It must give a different experience to be a photographer and travel, because pictures mean so much more to you, right? So I feel like you're more intentional about the pictures that you take.
I really am, and that's why I try and build in some downtime to these trips so that I can go back certain places. Like when we were in Angkor Wat in Cambodia, I went back that second day because I sort of saw it and was like, I didn't get the picture that I wanted because the time of day was wrong. Or I didn't get the picture that I wanted because I came in from this side and I should have come in from that side. And this was no different, because the very next night I went right back to that monument and took more pictures of people, and I knew the time of day to go, and I knew the angles that I wanted. And at this point I knew what my Google Translate was saying and not saying, so I could ask it properly. And I had a great time. I saw the city center. We actually ended up doing a tour and saw the main highlights of Vientiane, and had a great time. It was really cool.
What what was the food like? Because we know that you and Tasha definitely tried the food. So what was the food like? Give us the experience. Detail it to us like we were there.
I know this is almost turning into a food podcast unintentionally. And I swore I wouldn't do that. And I swore I wouldn't make it a tourism podcast. But the truth is, when I got off the plane at the airport, we found our guide and he took us over to the hotel. And as we were walking out, I heard somebody call my name. And when I turn around, it's Tommy. And I told him, I said, we're going to the hotel. Are you free this afternoon? Because we had talked about catching up that first night we were in the city. He said, I'm free for lunch. So we went back to the hotel, and a couple hours later, Tommy came and picked us up. And usually I try and do the things people talk about in the interviews so that I could come back and tell them. But in this case, Tommy took us to a restaurant. And I tried the Laos sausage, and I tried the papaya salad, and I tried all the stuff he was talking about as the foods that he missed at this really great restaurant. He brought a friend with him, and the four of us just sat and had this awesome lunch. And then I said, so you got to tell me where the smoothie spot that you like is. And he said, oh, well, let's just go over there. So he drove from lunch to the smoothie spot. And literally, Taylor, by like 3:30 the first day we set foot in Laos, we had done a lot of the things that Tommy talked about with Tommy. It was awesome. I had never met him before in person, and here we are spending hours together, listening to hip hop, riding around the city, and eating the food he talked about. It was great.
That is a My Home is Special first. My Home is really special now.
So you asked about what it was like. The Laos sausage was really, really tasty, but the papaya salad was even better than I thought it was. I had only seen papaya, like the orange fruit that's sweet. This is actually with green papaya, and it's almost like a coleslaw, a vinegar-based coleslaw is how I would describe it. But I mean, the flavors are different, but the textures and the overall acidity of it is just like that. I would get that with whatever I was ordering. So if I was ordering noodles or I was ordering sausage, I would always just have a side of papaya salad. And Taylor, it was so good. You're picking up a pattern here, which is a problem for us when we travel. It was so good, we literally ordered it every day. Every day. We had it for lunch the next day. We had it with dinner. Everywhere we went in Laos, we ordered papaya salad. It was that good. And I understand what Tommy meant when he said, I couldn't get it like I get it at home when I was living in Australia, and I couldn't wait to get back and get it the way we have it. And it was great.
So I need to figure out a way to find a papaya salad near me and or make it myself, is what that sounds like.
It definitely does. And if we can figure it out, I will let you know, because there's got to be a place in Chicago that can do it right.
Share the recipes, guys. Share the recipes.
No doubt.
Speaking of patterns and themes, we've talked a little bit about navigating these different places that you visited and just overall what transportation and how getting around is like. So how was it navigating the country? Was it easy? And are people as kind and as, non-aggressive as they were in Cambodia and Vietnam?
Let me first be clear. I don't know that people were aggressive. It was just crowded. And I described it as like a school of fish because that's what it was like. But they weren't piranha. They were fish and they were trying to go around you. There were a lot less people in Laos. Like, it wasn't as crowded and it was definitely more laid back. I went out for a walk to that monument the first day. The second day I just grabbed a tuk-tuk and he just rode. But traffic wasn't bad. There weren't a lot of mopeds. It wasn't super crowded and people were just pretty chill. Now, we only spent 2 nights in the capital, and the next night we went up to Luang Prabang, which is where most of the tourists and friends that I've had that went to Laos, that's where they would go. That's sort of the spot. We went to the capital because I wanted to see the capital and I wanted to catch up with Tommy. And so we took a train, and they have this train. It goes from the capital into China. So it basically just runs north through the country. The plan was to take the train, and we somehow figured it out. We got there really early. The train station is massive. We get on the train, and I'm starting to settle in because I want to edit pictures with the 3-hour ride or 2-hour ride, whatever it was. And I hear like basically a commotion. And I look up and there's like a fight that kind of broke out on the train between these tourists.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm thinking like, what is happening? I look, and Taylor, I wouldn't be exaggerating to say the youngest person in this group of about 12 that was in this fracas was probably 65 years old. we literally had like a senior citizen mini brawl breakout, and it was like shouting and people pointing at each other. And I think one dude got grabbed. But it was really wild. And I was like, really, is it going to be this kind of ride? Like, here we go.
It's WWE, but for AARP.
Exactly. And I was like, what is happening? Y'all settle down. But I was thinking, like, should I take out my phone? Should I record this? Like, are they really going to throw down? But like I said in an earlier episode, without naming names, certain countries seem to have tourists that just bring a lot of drama with them. And this was no different. It was almost impossible to get off the train because unlike proper train etiquette, when we got to our stop, they weren't letting us off. Like, people just started flooding into the train. And so I just went Chicago style. I was like, I've got luggage, and if I just put my head down and move forward, y'all are going to either move or get knocked down. And it may not have been the best way to handle things, but I need to get off this train because I was not trying to go into China with the next stop.
Your city training came in handy, Keith. It came in handy.
I'm from the South Side. We don't play that down here. Try that on the Dan Ryan train to see what happens.
Try that on the Dan Ryan. So what else did you get to see? I mean, you took a train, so I'm assuming you went somewhere.
We did. We went up to Laos Recap, and we spent several days up there. And there were really two things that were special and unique about that stop. First, we went to the Mandalao Elephant Reserve and got to basically hang out with elephants for a couple hours. We took a boat across the river to where the elephants lived, and it was a sanctuary for maybe 15 different elephants. And basically, you feed the elephants and have a good time there. And then they take the elephants for a walk through the forest. And you're just walking alongside these elephants. And they're not like on a rope or anything. They're just going for their walk, and you're walking alongside them. You could touch them. You could do what you wanted. But they started with a talk about what happens at that place and how it's different than other places. Like, this wasn't the type of place where you're riding elephants. They're not beating the elephants. This is a place where elephants that might have been mistreated in other places go to live out the rest of their lives. It was truly an elephant sanctuary, not an elephant amusement park. And you got to get up close and personal with the elephants as the guide was telling you about his love for elephants and how magnificent and majestic these animals are. So that was just a really cool stop. And I have pictures of me taking pictures in places where you'd be like, he's definitely going to get trampled. But Taylor, I saw the pictures that I wanted, and I don't care how big the elephant was, I was going to get my pictures. And I got them, and I lived to tell about it.
And you took an elephant on a walk. Not many people can say that they've done that, Keith.
It was cool. You just kind of wandered through the forest, and the elephant sort of goes, and they're just eating, and you're just hanging out with them for a couple hours. It was sort of like when we did gorilla trekking in Rwanda, except it was a little more peaceful and a little less terrifying.
And what was the second thing that you got to see or got to experience up there?
When we went to lunch in Luang Prabang when we arrived, we saw these signs about how to engage with the monks and how to take pictures of the monks. And you're supposed to dress appropriately, you're supposed to keep your distance, you're supposed to do X, Y, and Z. And it was just these signs, and they were up around the town. I was like, what is that all about? What our guide told us was that they do a daily alms with the monks. And so probably 100 monks, maybe more, basically walk down the street in the morning and get a ball of sticky rice, or what I'll call a granola bar, but like a rice bar or something. And the local people in the town basically sit on these little stools lining the street. And as the monks walk by with almost like trick or treat, they're holding these bags, and people are putting balls of sticky rice into the bag for the monks to eat. It's like what they do every morning. And it was really neat to see. I decided to bring my zoom lens so I could actually keep my distance. But the challenge for me, Taylor, was to take pictures that other tourists weren't getting. And it was a little discouraging to see how rude some of the tourists were. These aren't animals in a zoo. The monks ranged ages from probably 10 or 11 to well older than me. And to have people with their phones like right up in their faces as they're doing their daily alms, sort of totally ignoring the signs, cutting through the line to take the pictures, it was just crazy. And so I decided, well, I'm going to try and get the pictures that not everybody else is getting. I'm happy to say that I'm nearly certain I nailed that, but it made it a daily challenge. So we were there for 3 nights, I think, and I got up every day at 6 a.m. to get out there and try and get the picture that nobody else got.
I'm going to say I don't think you had a choice to get up.
Man, I was like, who is banging that thing? Don't they know we're trying to sleep? What was also interesting, though, Taylor, is as much as there were locals out there, again, I'm not sure how I feel about this, but it also became like a tourist thing. And so you could buy sticky rice from a local and sit out there and give it to the monks.
Oh.
And so you could participate in it as a tourist. And I just, that wasn't really my thing. I preferred to stay back, take my pictures from a distance, and let people live their lives and observe, not disrupt because I want a photo for Instagram.
Yeah, that is sometimes the problem in ethics when it comes to tourism. And I think that's something that we haven't highlighted, but I think is important to highlight at least once, that just be respectful of the places that you're visiting.
That was definitely not on display there, but I did enjoy that part of it and being able to see something that I think a lot of people want to see and experience. And we had a great time at the night market in Luang Prabang. We had food at this restaurant that was great, and we went back 2 nights in a row. And one afternoon around golden hour, right before sunset, I went out looking for people to take more photos of and ended up with a bunch of really great models. So I was really excited about that too.
I love that. I think that is probably 2 of the best things you've shared so far, for me at least. It's time. Keith, we're at Grown Folk Stories. Your name has just been called by Binky, and you're about to walk on stage. What is the story that you're prepping to tell the entire audience?
Taylor, there was a lot we did in Laos. So I had a tough time thinking about what's the one thing that I would highlight. Was it the elephants? Is it the almsgiving? Is it bumping into Tommy? Is it the fight on the train? And on our final day, we had an activity planned. It was 95 degrees. And unlike Chicago with the wind, where 95 feels like 85, with the humidity, it was 95 feels like 100 plus. And our plan was to start the day in a village and do a 2.5-hour hike through the forest. And we were going to a waterfall. Then we were going to do a 10 or 11 mile bike ride up and down the hills back to the hotel. We're doing the walk, and the cicadas and the insects are loud as hell. You're just like, what is happening? Like, somebody's going to give the signal and the swarm is just going to come and you're not going to see me again. You'll find my bones, decades from now, somewhere in this forest. We're doing the hike and we stop at this village and I take some pictures of some of the people, but again, they were preparing for a wedding, making papaya salad, ironically. And it just didn't feel appropriate for me to just sort of go into this family gathering where they were preparing food outside and be like, yo, pose for a picture so I can never see you again and put it on my Instagram page. I did take pictures of these 2 little kids that were just adorable, but that was it. And so we leave that village, we start walking, we stop at this little spring for like 5 minutes. I get totally swarmed by mosquitoes, which Tasha never does. And I'm like, we need to start walking again. So we do this 2.5-hour walk. And we get to the waterfall, and it's probably the prettiest waterfall I've ever seen. It was stunning. And what was really funny is as we get to the waterfall, there's all these other people there. I'm like, we saw nobody on this hike. We saw some dude running after his cows because they were on the trail, so we had to step aside, let the cows run by. But there were maybe 100 people, 200 people at the waterfall. And we're like, where'd they all come from? And we look, and there's a parking lot like right up the way. We're like, why the hell did we just walk 2 hours? If we could have just driven, but whatever. So we go to the waterfall, and at the base of the waterfall, there's a little spot you can swim. And I'm fine in the heat. Like, it bothers me, but it's not like that bad. Tasha was like, I'm going swimming. This is crazy. So she just jumps right in. Now, a couple months ago, we were at the glaciers in Patagonia, and I was talking all that smack about jumping in the glacial lake and how I was going to jump in the 40-degree, 45-degree water. Here, as hot as it was, I was my old self again. I got on the edge and I stood in the water. And I was like, this is cold as hell. I'm not getting in here. So as I'm standing there, Tasha's egging me on, telling me to get in. Other people are doing things. And at one point, Taylor, I see a sign that says, no jumping off the rocks. And of course, I see a couple of tourists. I don't know where they were from, maybe Australia or the US, jumping off the rocks, doing all kinds of craziness. And I look to the woman next to me, I go, well, this is how people end up on the news. And she goes, well, did you see that ambulance go? And I was like, yeah. And she goes, somebody just died here. Like a few minutes ago, I saw the ambulance leave. And I was like, what? She goes, yeah, they drowned. And I was like, what? She goes, I don't think they could swim. And I was like, well, then why the hell did they get in the... Anyway, so all of this is happening is that I'm standing there talking to her. I feel these little scrapes at my feet. And I haven't jumped in the water, but I'm standing on, they had stairs heading into the water. And I'm standing like one step in, so just above my ankles. And I feel these little things scraping at my feet. And I look down and it's fish. And now earlier in the trip, we had been to a fish spa. And the fish spa has these fish that eat the dead skin off your feet. And you sort of go to these things and you sit in the chair and they bring up this bucket with all these fish and they just clean your feet. They just eat. They were in this little lake at the bottom of the waterfall. And so as I'm standing there talking to this woman and listening to Tasha egg me on, my feet are starting to get eaten by these fish. I'm like, oh, hell no, get me out of here. Tasha's like, yeah, you got to keep moving, otherwise it gets... Taylor, the glacial lake was not there. There was no way I was getting in there. I was like, oh, hell no. And so Tasha had a great swim. I splashed some water on my feet, splashed some water on my wrists, felt the nibble from the fish, and got the hell out of the water because I'm smarter than that. I was like, first it's these little fish. I'm going to jump in and it's going to be piranha, and that ain't going to be me. And so, Taylor, we then went to a fantastic lunch. I had my papaya salad. I had my mango and sticky rice with sweetened condensed coconut milk for dessert, like I had at every meal, basically, from when we were in Vietnam. And then we started the 2-hour bike ride up and down the hills back. And it was a long, exhausting day to end our time in Laos. But it was fantastic. I would do it again in a heartbeat.
Now that is a story. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm happy you didn't get eaten by a piranha.
Yeah, I just got nibbled on by these little fish, and it was really not great. And I'll leave it at that. Well, thanks, Taylor, for letting me share a little bit about my time in Laos. And thanks to Tommy for coming back on and letting me debrief with him on our trip. Next up, Taylor, I think we're going to talk about Thailand. And I look forward to talking with you then.
Looking forward to talking with you then.
Thanks for listening to this episode of My Home is Special. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you get future episodes automatically. Go to myhomeisspecial.com for the occasional email update too. That's where links to photo galleries and a few other surprises will live. Be sure to follow KBev Photo on Instagram for behind-the-scenes footage during our journey, and it'll be in the stories. If you just want the photos, go to kbevphoto.com. There's a lot else on there to explore. For now, this is Keith, aka KBev, signing off. Peace.